Hey guys, I'm Jessica Mulder, and this is the Hard Way Pod, the podcast about learning from your mistakes. Today we have a guest, and it's just me. It's just me. We have no guest. I've been still continuing the pod, quarantine pod style on Zoom, and having guests every week, and it's been great, but I'm kind of exhausted, and in the scheduling, and even in just trying to, be on when talking to somebody all the time. So I kind of just thought I'd try something different this week and just do it myself and see how that went. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, I'm sure everybody's feeling it. This quarantine's still going on. And, I've still been working, as you know, if you've been listening. And, schedules are crazy. Everything's crazy. And just generally, like, the whole vibe of the world is been pretty emotionally, physically, mentally exhausting. So anything that I can do to sort of mitigate that, I'm doing it. So that's where we are right now. I've been running, which I hate doing, but it's actually making me feel a lot better, because I remember back when I was on psych meds for a little bit and I was getting off of them, I ran a lot just to sort of balance out the chemicals, and it did help. So once I figured out how to run properly, it's been a lot better, because it turns out, like, I used to play sports and shit in high school. Like, I'm saying it with air quotes because I was like in sports, but I was never like a sporty person, and I always got shin splints. And so I just assumed it was me and like my legs or whatever. But I think I was just running wrong for the past, 30 years, 35 years, however long I was able to run. So literally after like the first time of running, just to like help with my mental health, and do some self-care, like my feet and shins were hurting so bad that I was like, oh my God, how do people do this all the time? There's no fucking way. Like, there's something wrong with me. So I literally had to Google like how to run properly to not get shin splints, because I was about to get them again, which is what I got in high school when I was like running track on a concrete track, and I'm running on like the sidewalk, So like just a quick Google gave me a couple tips of things that like maybe you would think are simple, but for somebody that isn't a runner and doesn't really know how to run, I guess I was just doing a lot of extra stress to my legs that wasn't necessary. So it's been good since then. So if any of you have that problem, do a quick Google on how to run properly, like I did. So today I kind of wanted to talk about, I thought of a story that I wanted to talk about, and it's about not comparing yourself to other people, because, we all know, like, with social media and everything, and just seeing like people's lives through what they want to portray, it causes a lot of depression and envy and all this stuff that, is really not good for our mental health. Like, they're talking about it all the time online, on the news, wherever, about how social media kind of fucks with your head, when you see other people living these great lives and you're like, oh, I wish I was doing that. I'm not doing that, blah, blah, blah. So, one of the things now is like, we're kind of getting a little bit of a break from that, because everybody's pretty depressed and everybody's stuck at home. So there's like nobody really out posting things of them doing awesome stuff. So that would be kind of a relief right now, if it weren't for the fact that like everything else going on in the world is still fucking terrible, So it's like it's a little bit better, but it's bittersweet, at least in my opinion. The story that I'm going to tell you about is from when I was in high school. So this was like pre-social media, because I graduated high school in 2003. And so we didn't have social media back then, and everything, like all the envy just like came face to face in real time. So, and by what people told you and what you saw. So there was this girl, I'll call her Sydney, and she was beautiful. Like, she's a beautiful girl, pretty dumb. It was kind of like a joke that she was like pretty dumb. And like, so her personality wise, she was really fucking annoying and kind of dumb, but she was gorgeous. She like went to the gym all the time, had the perfect body. She had like a woman's body compared to like my 12-year-old body that I had, like up until I was like 18, before I even got any semblance of boobs. And even still tiny, so she's like woman's body. To give you like some context, later on, she ended up in it's like Playboy or Hustler or Maxim, whatever. One of those magazines were like, you're so hot all around, we're going to pay you to take pictures of you. So she's a model, hot, And so anyway, this girl, was like dating my friend and whatever. And I was dating this guy that was like one of the first loves that I had in high school. Not the dead one that I've talked about before. This was like later in high school. Maybe I'm like 17. And, we're all kind of hanging out in groups, and then she and her boyfriend break up. And then I start seeing that like the love of my life at the time is hanging out with her a lot more because they live in the same neighborhood and all that. And I'm kind of like, oh no, but I'm like, no, he wouldn't date her, whatever. He's friends with her. She dated our other friend, blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't technically with him. So it was like, what we were hooking up. So it was one of those things where it was like, well, I'm kind of the girlfriend, but not good enough to be called the girlfriend. So the self-esteem is already pretty low, right? And then I find out through our mutual friend who she used to date that they broke up, and she and the guy I was in love with were like legit dating, and we were just like, we talked about it, and I remember us finding out at the same day. We're like, oh, they're dating now. So they kind of like ditched us to date each other. And it was super depressing. And I was like, son of a bitch. Like, this girl like has like everything. She never really like did anything. She kind of was like one of those people that seemed like she wanted to find a guy with money and like kind of do whatever and just be pretty, And so like I was so jealous of her. I was like really jealous of her, and I hated her because I just also didn't like her personality. So it wasn't one of those things where it was like, oh, I'm envious of you, I want to be you. I just like kind of hate you. And now like I had one guy that I really, really loved, teenage love, but still. And like now you have him. And of course he's going to like choose you, the gorgeous, like model-esque chick, that's like easy or whatever. Who knows? So anyway, they're dating, blah, blah, blah. Like they end up dating for a long time. They end up living together. He buys her puppies, whatever. And eventually like years go by, and like I'm seeing her life on social media now that it exists, and like everything's great with her. Now I see the whole like the modeling thing in the magazines, and she's no longer with the guy that I dated, but whatever. She's moved on. And she's got like a new guy. She's engaged, and everything in her life is perfect. And just look at her on social media being gorgeous in her model photos and planning her wedding and, flitting around, like traveling all over the world with her soon to be husband. And like her life is perfect, all this stuff. And I'm like, fuck this bitch. Like, oh my God, how is she still just like crushing it? And, it like kind of hit that like nostalgic nerve from like back in high school. Cause I'm like, I don't really know her anymore. I never really knew her that well other than like mutual friends. So, but it was like still kind of like a raw nerve, I guess, to just see her being so successful. And like, I felt myself being like, fuck, I wish, my life was like that, or her life was worse, because clearly everything that's like ever happened to her has worked out for her perfectly. And, she's got her own business. She's got her whatever. And it's like, I don't know. I think she was like an accountant now or something. And she had like a bookkeeping company or something. And I'm like, oh, she knows math too. Fucking great. I thought she was an idiot, whatever. So anyway, so I'm just like, this fucking bitch, I'm like just totally doing that social media thing where you're like, their life's so much better than mine, blah, 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 getting down on yourself about it. And then I find out like years later. So now it's like, she's gone on her life. Like, I think it was like within the window of seeing her planning this wedding. And then all of a sudden, like things sort of stopped. And then I found out through a friend of mine, something that like almost humanized this girl for me in a way where it was pretty cool, because I had like hated her for so long. And every time she was doing well, I hated her even more. That she, like when I heard this story about her, I was like, oh my God, bad things can happen to her too. But obviously you don't see this on social media. So So I'm talking to my friend about it, and apparently, like, she made her money and she had her money, which good for her. She had planned this whole wedding. Everybody's there, like this huge wedding that she paid for the whole thing. And then she gets left at the fucking altar, you guys. At the altar. And it wasn't even like, oh, leading up to the planning, the guy changes his mind and is like, I can't do this. It's like straight up, at least from what I heard through this story, from my friend who knows, close friends of hers, that she's like legit wedding singer style waiting at the fucking altar and gets stood up with like sort of a text that's like, I can't do this, and just gets dumped in front of everybody she knows and he knows, which is horrifying. Just absolutely horrifying. And to me, I'm just like, oh, I felt bad for her. Like, I wasn't like, yes. And I was surprised because I thought I'd be like, yes, finally. You stole my boyfriend in high school. Oh, fuck you. You deserve this. But no, I almost instead was just like, oh, I know nothing about you. I know nothing about your life. You've, portrayed this thing, which everybody's guilty of. Like, who's going to put up a bunch of sad shit all the time, And it's like, you had this like really fucked up, horrible, traumatic thing happen to you in front of everybody you know. And it sort of like made me like care for her and be like, you're a human being. You are like not the worst. Like, maybe you are the worst. That's why you got left at the altar. Like, those shitty things sneaking in there. But like, the worst things can happen even the most perfectly seeming quote unquote people, and it just kind of reminds you to keep things in perspective and sort of remind yourself that you don't really know what the fuck people are going through at all. And I think about that a lot because, everybody, like, I know a lot of people that like are taking, they take social media breaks and then they tell me, because they're like, oh, it's fucking with my self-esteem. I'm not doing enough, all this stuff. And like, as a person who never thinks I'm doing enough, I totally get it. And I'm like a workaholic to the point where I've, given myself tendinitis in both arms and carpal tunnel in both wrists because I'm like never really doing enough. So people will tell me all the time, they're like, oh, you're crushing it. I'll see you do this or that or whatever. So like, I kind of try to make it a point to, if I see somebody like looking at me like that, telling them something kind of shitty that I've been going through and being like, no, dude, yeah, sure. I still, my life is good. Don't get me wrong. Like, I like my life. I love my life, but everything isn't perfect. Like, don't look at the social media. Don't freaking take that and like use that as your like only example of why somebody's better than you. Because literally, if this hot ass pays for everything model chick can get left at the altar, man, hey, you're not that different than everybody. You know what I mean? Like, you are one of us. The shitty things can happen to you. And I think that was like weirdly refreshing. Sorry to her for it being refreshing, but it was, yeah, that was fucked up. I think about that a lot. I think like I haven't really looked into her, but I'm pretty sure that like now she has another guy that isn't a douche and is like had a baby or whatever. So I think her life is good. So that's good news for her. I hope she's happy, which is like one of the things that I never thought that I would say about her. I'd be like, wishing the worst on her, which you don't want to have with anybody really. It's not good for your own mental health, but yeah, I think, she's doing well now. So that's another lesson. It's like, you can have that crazy ass thing happen to you and things will still be okay. So it's sort of like that hang in there sort of thing. Yeah. So I just wanted to talk about that. What else? What else can we talk about, guys, when it's just you and me? So I think I had mentioned a couple weeks before when I was on the podcast with Niles Abston, who was just releasing his comedy album, just about like feeling like I'm not, getting to do a lot of the stuff that I'd normally be doing. Like, I'm a designer, as you know, and a lot of, my day job requires that. And a lot of my projects that are fun for me require that after hours. So I've really had to scale back on like what I can and can't do because I just have to rest. I'm forcing myself to rest. And I'd been already doing that before we hit quarantine, just as far as like designing goes. Like I was trying to learn animation, and I like did a little short one, which I put in one of the episodes as like one of the clips. And I had so many ideas of things that I wanted to accomplish, design wise, and even bought one of those like tablets, because I used to have one of the electronic tablet things so you can draw straight on the computer, but then with all like the updates it became outdated pretty fast. So yeah, I bought one of those, and then like it was like within minutes or something, all of a sudden I have tendonitis in both arms. I'm like, well, I can't fucking use this thing. Great. So I was, trying to think like, what else can I do? So I'm just like, I know, I'll like start doing stand up way more than I have been, focus less on these art projects, and like get my 30 minutes down for the year is one of my goals for 2020. Right. But then lo and behold, here comes goddamn coronavirus fucking up my shit. And I'm like, okay, everything that I had before that like outside of work made me feel like I was accomplishing things and like actually getting to see something come to fruition, which is really big for me. Like watching something go start to finish and then be completed is like a really good feeling, So I'd have my show every Tuesday, my comedy show. And at the end of the show, me and Landon would be like, that was another great show. And we'd have pictures to show for it. And people would be like, that was so fun. All that stuff. We had like all these things planned to make the show better. They're building a stage. They're doing all this. We're going to maybe start getting paid soon, would be really cool. We finagled drink tickets for the comics. Like things were growing and getting better. And then like that gets taken away, So, okay, there goes that creative outlet, right? And then the podcast, which I've still been doing, but haven't been going to the studio because it's like, well, for one thing, just putting, I think they've still been open and they've been able to, but like, I don't want to necessarily risk being in there and getting sick. And I also am just like, that's just another opportunity to be in a room with people, get sick, perpetuate this whole thing. And it costs a lot of money too. So it's like with the way things are going, I'm like, I don't know. My day job involves my arms. I can't really use them. This is my whole like career. Am I going to even have a job soon if I can't do my one function, which has been really stressful for me for sure. And I'm like, I'm like, it'll save me a lot of money if I just do it on Zoom. Maybe it won't be as good of quality, but it'll still be great. And it has been fun, and it's been really good keeping up with the routine. But there's like something about it that it's just not the same, and it's not the same not having the videos and like editing together the clips and all this stuff that just like kind of took some of like the sparkle out of it for me, I guess. So I just kind of have been like mega depressed and thinking like, what the fuck am I going to do with myself, And I'm like, okay, you can start running, but like that doesn't always work out if you're depressed or you're exhausted or you're got a busy work day or whatever. I'm like trying a lot of these things. And I started drawing more just like in a notebook, but again, even still, I can only do so much with my hands. And so it's like, all right, what the hell am I going to do with myself? So what I ended up doing, I don't even know why. One day, like I just thought of this, like I was driving like to this store or something to grab something really quick in my fucking mask or whatever, thinking about the state of the world, ready to give up on everything like, you do every couple days. And you're like, what's it all for? This is so terrible. Everything's depressing. And like, I started like, for some reason, like I had like lyrics in my head, like I was like writing something in my brain to the point where when I got home, I like wrote down what I was thinking, And this is something that like I used to always do like growing up, because like as a kid I always kept journals and I always drew and whatever, but like I fucking hate poems for some reason. Like I always love music lyrics, which is like basically the same, but it's like if you just have the poem on its own, then I'm like, this is annoying and pretentious and I don't like it for some reason. And I think part of that was just like as a kid and growing up, like, in my teen years and whatever, I'd go to like be dramatic in my journal or my diary or whatever. And I'd accidentally start like writing little poems. Like I can look back in all my notebooks that I have and I have poems in there and I'm like, ugh, like what are these? Who do you think you are? That sort of thing. But like it just like kind of ends up coming out like rhyming or whatever, like somehow. So I always like had this weird like hatred for poems, but also at the same time a love for like music lyrics, to the point where like I don't know if you're one of those people like I am, where it's like if you find a song that you really love, like you play it over and over until you basically ruin it for yourself and can't listen to it for a year. So yeah, I do that all the time. I learn the lyrics to songs like because I want to know all of them and I want to sing them, and it's like sometimes I even like learn them by mistake just because I've listened to the song so many times over and over. So anyway, so this day I'm like coming home, having a pretty rough day, probably like my third meltdown of the week, over whatever. What am I going to do with myself? I've got like debt collectors calling me because of that whole thing since episode 7 that I did, where I tried to get a negotiator for my debt, and then like that fell through, and then all of a sudden like it's charged off of my credit report. So I'm like, I'm not going to pay it. And then like now they sold it to a credit collector. So now it's like nonstop credit collectors calling me, to the point where like I got into an argument with one the other day because he was just such a dick. And I'm like, so basically just don't do any of the things that I did when it comes to that, because it was all a bad idea. And I don't know how I'm going to figure it out, but I'm going to figure it out. So don't worry about that. But anyway, I was like one of those days where I was just like having such a shit day, and I accidentally like wrote a poem or lyrics or whatever, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. Probably nothing. It's just going to sit in my notes, and that's that. But what ended up like happening is like I was sitting at home alone, and like my boyfriend, he's a recording engineer, and so he like has a studio down the street where he can go at least and still keep working on his stuff, with him and like one of his other bandmates. So like they're safe and they can still kind of keep their projects rolling, because he's not, he'd been furloughed from his job. So I definitely had like alone time, and I like another friend of mine was like talking about GarageBand or something. And I'm like, oh, I think I have that. So for like no reason whatsoever, I was like, I'm going to play with GarageBand and make a song that I'm going to do nothing with probably ever, because I can't fucking sing really at all. And what do I, like aside from like growing up with my mom as a pianist and like learning the piano as a kid, I never really kept it up. I never wanted to be a musician. I just enjoy music. I don't want to like be in a band or anything like that. But I was like, oh, I'm going to fuck around with GarageBand and like, get some creative outlet of some sort before I go absolutely insane and freak out, basically. Just freak the fuck out, because I'm already freaking out. So, and I was like, and at least with that, I'm not doing the same tiny motions of design. I'm not doing, I'm not like sitting in the chair forever. I can have like the microphone. I could just like press little buttons with my finger, and I'm like just using the computer. And so I end up making a song, and like it sounds pretty cool. It doesn't have the lyrics to it yet, but I make like just like the base of the song, and I'm like, shit, this sounds like pretty cool for me, like knowing not what the fuck I'm doing at all, which I highly recommend just like trying some shit you don't know at all, because I'm really like proud of what came out of it, even though it's still not perfect. It's, I finished something, and I learned something new, and I like saw something get completed that kind of gave me that feeling that I'd been missing this past like 50 fucking whatever days we've been sitting here. So like I did just the music part that night, and then I was like, oh, that's going to be that. But then I was like into it, and then I was like, all right, why don't you try to sing too and see if you can like come up with melodies and shit. You've been sitting at the studio with Travis and the boys for a couple of years. Like you can kind of see how they like come up with the process now, like through osmosis. Like, why don't you just do it? You don't have to show it to anybody, which is a great way to learn something new, is be like, oh, this is for nothing, and nobody's going to ever have to see it. So if it fucking sucks, who cares? Right? So anyway, so I did that. I like, like rewrote the lyrics some more that I had just written out myself, because obviously I did that backwards. Like, I think you're supposed to write them after. I don't know what you're supposed to do, but whatever. I ended up changing it based on the song itself that I made and singing it and finishing it. And I'm like, I like this, like, which is surprising, because as your own worst critic, which I am, I'm like expecting to hear myself and be like, this is a piece of shit. And maybe it isn't good compared to like some other stuff like that's like real professional shit. But like for me and for what I wanted out of it, I really like it. And that's a big thing for me. So yeah, I did that. I finished that and I did it all myself, which is really cool and made me feel really good and happy. With the exception of, I do have like a couple parts where I had Travis sing a little bit, like just like tiny little add-in things, and then he mastered it when I was done, which I don't necessarily know what that entails because I'm not a recording engineer, but all I know is when I sent him the file and then when I got it back, it sounded way better as far as like quality goes. So just like rounder, fuller, cooler, whatever. I don't know. And I think so because I was like so proud of it, I was like, you know what? I showed it to a couple of like my really close friends that I really trust their music taste. And they were like, this is cool. I like it. And I was like, cool. Especially because I was showing it to people that would be like, I don't know about this, So it was nice and like, reinforced that I was like, okay, I did something good. I'm not crazy because I feel crazy. I kind of want to share it with people now. So I had to like go through the process, of course, learning it the hard way because I have no fucking idea what I'm doing, of figuring out how to like get it out on the platforms or whatever, like Spotify and all that shit. Not that I have like plans to become a singer now, but I'm like, okay, if I did this thing like that I made, I should put it somewhere. And I don't want to sit here and like make a music video and edit this whole thing together, which again would require my arms and me sitting at a computer. I'm just going to submit it and see if they'll accept it and put it on the things. It's been a couple weeks now. And I think it usually takes a couple weeks according to their guidelines for like, cause they have to review and approve this sort of stuff before they put it on Spotify and all that. So I'm still waiting, and that really taught me that I'm really fucking impatient, and it's driving me a little nuts because I'm like checking constantly, and I'm like, what's the problem with it? Are they going to be like, it's really bad, you can't have this, and then the anxiety starts going, and I'm like, well, shit, what the fuck am I supposed to do? And there's like nothing really I can do but wait, which is driving me nuts. So I've decided that at the end of this episode, I'm going to share it with you guys by just including it on the tail end of the episode so that you can hear it and sort of like see this like project that I worked on when I kind of was like collapsing because I didn't have any of my normal projects. And sometimes that happens. Like you have all these things going on and then everything goes away and you don't really know what to do with it, and you kind of sometimes feel like you want to like just say, fuck it, give up on everything. You don't know how many times I've been like, I'm not doing this podcast anymore. Because fuck it, who cares? And I'm glad that I'm still doing it because shit, like that's the worst thing you can do is just give up on everything. Obviously, see episode whatever the fuck it is on Don't Be Afraid to Ask for Help about that. But yeah, I'm just going to share it on here at the end, and I'll hope you like it. You can let me know what you think, but don't be mean because it's my first try, obviously. But and then maybe possibly they'll release it. But if they don't, hey, at least I got to share it with people that seem to care about what I'm doing because you guys are listening in the first place. So I think that's all I kind of really want to talk about today. I'm going to try and relax. I've been working since 7:30 in the morning because I was on a deadline and worked all weekend. And then those motherfuckers extended the deadline within the hour. Can you believe that shit? And yeah, so I'm tired and I just want to watch 90 Day Fiancé before the 90 days because that train wreck is amazing. And yeah, that's really what I'm going to do. So to recap, guys, don't compare yourself to other people. You don't know what's going on with them. And even the hottest, most perfect people that you think are just so perfect can have bad shit happen to them. And it sucks. It sucks for them. It sucks for her. And I'm glad she's better. And it, I think, made me a better person to even just see that. and put things into perspective and stop being like so full of your own shit that you can't see that like you know nothing. Like no, realizing you know nothing is, I think, one of the best things ever. And yeah, don't feel bad. We're all, or at least I'm speaking for myself, going through some shit. And if any of the stuff you've been working on is no more, try something else, because I do feel better after I did this. So yeah, that's it. And I'll talk to you guys next week. But in the meantime, this is called Strange. I hope you like it.
Will you think I'm crazy if I start acting strange? 'Cause I haven't felt the same since we've been locked up in a cage. It's hard to escape from numbing my brain. Don't you think it's crazy how we turn it a page? Got swept away, I'm lost inside of this place.
There's gotta be something.
Wish I could explain it, I'm just feeling so drained. I wanna pick up the pace, but I'm stuck in a haze. If I forget to breathe, will you remind me? Just waiting for the day that I don't feel deep.